Okay, whenever you're ready.
Okay, this is a message for Robert Rodriguez and dear family, friends, and in this case, classmates. Allow me to ask you, I plan to mention some events from the year 1953. Does anyone know of any particular event that stands up to mind, come to mind? Well, let me tell you. The night of January 19th, 71.1% of all television sets in the United States were tuning into the show I Love Lucy to watch Lucy give birth. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that show, but that was a very big hit. May 15th, 1953, heavyweight Rocky Marciano knocked out Joe Walker in Chicago for the heavyweight boxing title. And on May 29th, same year, Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay became the first men to reach the summit of Mount Everest. And probably the most important event, October 16, 1953, Robert Bobby Rodriguez was born in Waterbury, Connecticut. I would dare to guess that the audience for Bobby's birth could not have been as large as the one for Lucy's child. But he probably had his own crowd. After all, he was part of a gang of 14 siblings. And if you include extended family members and friends, he probably had half of the Puerto Rican population living in Waterbury at that time as witnesses of this such a happy occasion, this historic event. Believe me, I know, because when I married his sister, one of his youngest sister, and we had our firstborn child, there were so many of them coming to see my son in the hospital that the hospital didn't have a room big enough to hold them. I mean, there was an overflow. Now, the part about Rocky Marciano knocking out Joe Walker is brings to my reminiscence of Bobby's many struggles and battles in life, and how he ended up winning the big fight and becoming a champion. And like Sir Edward Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, he had to overcome many difficulties to reach the summit of personal and professional success. Bobby Robert grew up with many siblings, and also what we call arrimados. Arrimados are not blood relatives, they're friends and acquaintances that you know from Puerto Rico who come over here and they need a place to stay for a while until they're on their own feet and able to move on their own. And Bobby's parents had a big house. So many people came and lived with them for a while. Plus all the siblings, actually it was 14, two died very young, so there was 12 siblings and extended relatives living in the house. And with a situation like this, you can imagine, one either learns to conform and go along with the program. And in this case, my wife learned. She was the goody two shoes, always did what was right. Or one becomes very competitive. Well, Bobby, Robert, grew up to be very competitive. And talking about the Yankees, his father and all his brothers, and all the families and everyone that I knew were Mets fans. Guess what? When Bobby died and he was in the casket, he had a Yankees hat on. He had to be different. That was part of his makeup. He had to out-hustle, outsmart, outmaneuver his father, his siblings, his brothers, and anybody who got in his way in the house. But what happened? He also ended up out drinking all of them. Bobby was moving on his way to become an alcoholic. So at a very young age, my wife tells me that she remembers he was probably 9 or 10 years old. Bobby began to battle with the demon of alcohol. But I'll talk more about that later. Now, I grew up in the same neighborhood as Robert. I got to know something about him, nothing very personal. One thing I knew was about his passion for music. And these were on the early 70s. And salsa music, the line music was real big. I mean, it was really busting out, it was all over. And Bobby got really into it. And he learned how to play the bass guitar. And for a while there, he joined a couple of line groups. They had their own band, and played, and the bass, the bass guitar became his passion, and he played that bass guitar until the end of his life. It said that once he left the scene on the street, and he left the band, and he went back to church, he started playing Christian music, started playing in the masses. One of his brothers was, his older brother Joe, was the music director in one of our Catholic churches in Waterbury, and he joined him, and they used to play in the Spanish masses especially, so he was able to still use his gift, his talent for the music. There was, at the end, there was a lot about Bobby that I did not know, and I got to know more about him when I married his sister, his younger sister, and I became part of his family. And of course, in the process of doing this, learning more about Bobby so I could talk a little bit about him, I learned all the details that I did not know. To my surprise, I learned that Bobby used to love animals. His sisters tell me that when he was young, all kinds of stray dogs would follow him all the time. And if there was a mean dog around them, and maybe I was like, Bobby was the only one that was able to approach his dogs and calm them down. He was like a magnet for strays. So much so that his sisters tell me that they used to call him San Francis. Another thing I learned about Bobby was, and remember, we grew up in the street. He was a streetwise kid. He was, the type was cocky and all that. But I found out he was scared. He was scared of scary movies. And they mentioned that when the movie The Exorcist came out, he went to see it. But 3 days after that, for 3 days after, he was sleeping at the bottom of the bed of his brother, oldest brother, because he was afraid to sleep by himself. So here goes the big macho man. And my wife told me this. My wife's a hairstylist. And she said that when I was in his early 20s, he used to get his hair permed about every 3 months. And I said, nobody has such a beautiful hair, such nice hair. But again, he was the image of this tough macho man. No, that was the streetwise kid, the tough macho man, the bad Puerto Rican. Really, he wasn't the one I thought I knew. But then there was the thing I considered the second most important thing that I learned about Bobby as I became part of his family, and especially since I was doing the research for this, to be able to share about his life, was that Bobby did become an alcoholic, full blown. I knew that he used to party with me, we used to party in the street, but I didn't realize how bad he had gotten into the addiction. So much so that I learned around the age of 16, he had to leave the house. He couldn't leave the house, and he found himself on the street, and to the point that he used to hustle copper and any kind of metal he could gather, bring it to the scrap yard, so he could make a couple of dollars to support himself. And he struggled for a while there. But when I found this out, how bad Bobby had become, how much alcohol had taken over his life, became a happy occasion, at least for me. I already had gone back to the church myself. I had changed my way. And when I found out Bobby had already moved out of Waterbury, he had entered a treatment program, and he had been in recovery for over 5 years. And that was only the beginning. So even though I found out how bad when I found out, he was happy because he was in the process of changing. A few years after that, he felt secure enough in his own sobriety, in his recovery, that he was able to come back home. He moved to Stanford, he came back home to Waterbury, and he got his high school diploma, got his bachelor's and master's degree in counseling from the University of Bristol, and was working on his PhD when God called him home. For the last 7 years of his life, Bobby worked for the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services in Waterbury. There he was able to use not only his education, but more than anything else, his experience and his struggles with alcoholism to help others recover from their own addictions. And I learned that Bobby went out of his way. He knew what people went through, so he went out of his way. And many times he would provide for them out of his own pockets for their own material needs. I also knew that Bobby got involved with some of the churches in town, and he helped start a food bank in one of the local churches in Waterbury. I did not know this. And finally, the thing that's numero uno for me, the thing that's most important, was that for a while there, Bobby had left the Catholic Church. He had some struggles. His wife was not Catholic, so I guess he figured he'd join her church for a while. But coming from the kind of family that Bobby came from, I knew his mom. His mom was more Catholic than the Pope. I remember telling her, I said, Heno, that's their nickname, Heno. What do you think about a woman's priest? And she's like, oh, my dead body. She was very strong. She was strong, but she had died, so the family has scattered. So, but for my wife and some of the close sisters, the Catholic Church was so important to us. So it was very difficult while Bobby was out. But Bobby was sick for a few months. And while he was sick, the church that it was, I guess, was not ministering to him. It was ministering to his wife. I don't know what happened. He was in before at the time. But my sister-in-law works as a secretary for our parish. So she was able to bring priests. Bobby reconciled with the church. He received his sacraments. And Bobby had a Catholic funeral mass. And Bobby was buried in a Catholic cemetery. By the way, not too far from where his mom and one of his sisters have been buried. Like I keep on referring, there was a lot I didn't know about Bobby until I started working on this, trying to find out more. But God knew. And God had prepared a place for him. Robert Bobby Rodriguez had returned home, and he rests in peace. Thank you.